It's a really strange contradiction. You hit 20, and society collectively decides you've arrived at your absolute physical prime.
Right. The absolute peak.
Yeah, you're supposed to be at the peak of your powers. And yet, if you look at the reality, for so many people navigating their 20s, half the time you wake up feeling oddly tired or, deeply foggy or just inexplicably drained. Like if you're listening to this on your morning commute right now, clinging to a travel mug of coffee just to feel somewhat human before you open your inbox, you know exactly what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. It really doesn't feel like a physical prime when you need artificial energy just to send an email.
Exactly. It's wild.
It's a massive paradox because on paper, the body in its 20s is highly capable and incredibly resilient. But the thing is, capable does not mean invincible.
Right. Those are two very different things.
Exactly. And what happens is that this inherent resilience creates a very convincing illusion. Because your biological systems can acutely handle a lot of stress, like skip sleep, heavy weekends, terrible nutrition, you start to operate under the assumption that your body will simply always cope.
You just look around and you see two 25-year-olds having wildly different realities. You've got one person who wakes up fresh, they're sharp, their joints don't ache, they hit the gym, and they genuinely feel strong.
Yeah, thriving.
And then you have another person, same exact age, same basic biology, who is just constantly running on empty. They're, surviving the week, but they're certainly not thriving.
And that stark contrast is what makes this specific decade so critical to understand. It's a decade of high potential, yes, but fundamentally it's a decade of systemic pattern formation.
Okay, what do you mean by pattern formation?
Well, the mechanisms you rely on to manage stress, the way you structure your sleep architecture, how you fuel your cells, these daily micro-choices are quietly pouring the concrete for the biological foundation you will live in for the rest of your adult life.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that mystery then. Because the immediate place the mind goes when you feel that constant exhaustion at 22 or 25 is, well, it's a deep sense of panic about aging.
Oh, the metabolism panic.
Yes. The common refrain is always like, is this because my metabolism is already crashing? Did I hit my peak at 18 and now it's just a slow decline?
We really have to dismantle that metabolism myth right out of the gate because it's biologically inaccurate.
It is.
Completely. There is this pervasive idea of the blazing fast teenage metabolism that magically falls off a cliff the moment you blow out the candles on your 20th birthday. In reality, human energy expenditure, our basal metabolic rate, is remarkably stable.
Wait, really? Stable until when?
When adjusted for fat-free mass, your cellular energy use stays essentially flat from age 20 all the way to age 60.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so the engine itself is not slowing down.
Not at all. The engine is fine.
But if the engine isn't slowing down, then why does the daily experience feel so incredibly sluggish? If the baseline is flat, I mean, something else has to be draining the battery.
It's the sudden drastic shift in the environment the engine operates within. What feels like biological aging at 23 is usually just a massive drop in baseline activity combined with, well, chaotic recovery.
Oh, I see.
Think about the physical reality of the transition into adulthood. You go from walking around a sprawling campus all day, maybe playing a sport, having somewhat structured meal times provided for you, to suddenly sitting at a desk for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Right. Your incidental movement just falls off a cliff. All that non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, the calories burned, just living and moving around, it just vanishes.
Precisely. And your sleep schedule often becomes completely untethered from natural circadian rhythms. To put a mechanical spin on it, it's not that the car's engine is suddenly failing or degrading. It's more like a smartphone battery. The battery itself hasn't lost its capacity, but suddenly you have 50 heavy background apps running at all times.
That's a great way to look at it.
You've got financial stress, career anxiety, irregular sleep running in the background, and you're wondering why the phone is dying by 2 p.m.? We just confuse the mental and physical strain of newfound adult freedom with actual biological decline.
And because that strain becomes the new normal, people stop recognizing the warning signs. The signs just become like normalized parts of the culture.
Like waking up with heavy mornings, where gravity just feels turned up to 11, and dragging yourself out of bed feels like a monumental physical task.
Yes, or the classic weekend hangover effect. And I don't just mean from alcohol.
Right, the social jet lag.
Exactly. I mean the social habits where you stay out late, entirely shift your sleep schedule by 4 hours, and then spend Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in a state of jet lag, just trying to recover from Saturday.
Yeah, it takes half the week to feel normal again.
That weekend sleep shifting is a perfect example of a biological mechanism being abused. When you shift your sleep window by 3 or 4 hours on the weekend, you are inducing social jet lag. Your brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock, gets completely confused about what time zone it's in.
Oh, wow.
By the time it adjusts, it's Monday morning, and your alarm is dragging you back to reality. If your daily routines are constantly throwing your internal clock into chaos, the internal systems that rely on that clock take a massive hit.
And the system that relies most heavily on that rhythm and takes the biggest invisible hit has to be the endocrine system, right? The hormone.
Oh, absolutely. The endocrine system is basically the victim of all that chaos.
We tend to talk about hormones as these abstract, invisible chemicals, but in your 20s, they are the software dictating your reality. They control your mood, your sex drive, your skin clarity, your ability to recover from a workout.
They govern everything, and they operate on strict circadian schedules. When we look at how this plays out, it's highly dependent on biological sex. But the underlying vulnerability to lifestyle stress is exactly the same.
How does it look for women?
Well, for many women, the 20s are typically the years when menstrual cycles stabilize. But paradoxically, this is the exact time when underlying metabolic and hormonal conditions can roar to the surface. We see conditions like PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, become incredibly prominent.
And from a mechanistic standpoint, that's largely driven by insulin resistance and chronic stress, right? The chaotic diet and high stress elevate cortisol, which in turn disrupts insulin, leading the ovaries to overproduce androgens like testosterone.
That is the exact pathway, yes.
And that manifests as, irregular periods,
Right.
deep cystic acne, or sudden stubborn weight gain.
Right. The body is effectively signaling that the metabolic environment is not safe. And for men, the hormonal disruption is equally profound, just in a different direction.
Because the stereotype is that guys in their 20s are overflowing with testosterone, basically immune to physical consequence.
Right, the idea that a 24-year-old guy can survive on pizza and 3 hours of sleep and still build muscle.
Exactly.
The potential for high testosterone is there, absolutely, but testosterone production is incredibly fragile. The vast majority of a man's daily testosterone is produced during the deep, slow-wave stages of sleep.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If you are chronically stressed, meaning your cortisol is elevated or you are drinking alcohol frequently, you disrupt that deep sleep architecture. The brain simply does not send the luteinizing hormone pulse to the testes to produce testosterone.
So the cortisol essentially shuts down the production line.
It does. Evolutionarily, if your body perceives constant stress signaled by high cortisol from bad sleep, poor diet, and modern anxiety, it downregulates reproductive hormones because it thinks you are in a survival situation.
It prioritizes keeping you awake and alert over building muscle or maintaining libido.
Exactly. So if a 25-year-old guy feels totally flat, unmotivated, and physically weak, it's almost always a lifestyle-induced hormonal suppression, not premature aging.
Here is where it gets highly practical, though. With so much external noise, the stress of a new job, the chaotic sleep, the social obligations, how do you untangle a genuine underlying hormonal issue from just feeling like garbage because you had a chaotic week? Like, how do you know when to seek medical help versus when to just fix your routine?
The answer lies in developing what we can call body literacy.
Body literacy. I like that.
It's the practice of learning your own personal biological baseline. The problem is, most people in their 20s have never actually felt their true baseline because they have been operating in a state of sleep and nutritional deficit since high school.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. It's treating your body less like a black box where things just happen to you and more like a dashboard where you actually understand the telemetry.
Exactly. To build that literacy, you have to run controlled experiments on yourself. You have to experience what your natural energy actually feels like when you get a strict, non-negotiable 8 hours of sleep for 14 days straight.
Which almost no 20-something does.
Rarely. You have to pay attention to the mechanical feedback. What happens to your skin texture when your stress at work spikes? How does your resting heart rate respond the day after drinking alcohol?
And for women, I imagine it's tracking the nuances of the cycle, understanding how energy naturally dips and peaks across the month rather than fighting it.
Yes, working with your biology instead of against it. And for men, it's noticing if a lack of drive is genuinely a lack of passion for a job, or if it's just the chronic stress of terrible sleep bleeding over into your psychology.
It's simply paying attention to repeated biological signals instead of ignoring them. Because if you ignore the internal chemistry, it eventually manifests in the physical structures of the body.
That's entirely true.
So let's shift there to the physical scaffolding. Because if there is one thing a 20-year-old assumes is utterly indestructible, it's their physical frame. The
Yeah.
bones, the joints, the skin. You feel like you are made of titanium.
Well, the 20s are highly physically forgiving, which is a massive double-edged sword. Your cells regenerate quickly. If you are new to resistance training, you can recruit motor units and build muscle tissue remarkably fast. You can recover from a minor ligament tweak in days.
Right.
But recovering faster does not mean you can endure damage endlessly. The damage is cumulative.
Yeah, it's like paying for your lifestyle with a biological credit card. You're getting away with skipping your warm-ups, ignoring mobility, rounding your lower back on deadlifts, and missing sleep. The transactions are all being approved right now. But the bill for those tight hip flexors, the degraded cartilage, and the chronic shoulder impingement is already in the mail.
Oh, the bill always comes due, and that accumulation of hidden damage is most visible in the skin.
The skin? How so?
Well, at 22, your skin looks incredibly resilient. It bounces back from a sunburn, dehydration, or a night of smoking. But at a cellular level, chronic stress, UV exposure, and sugar consumption are driving a process called glycation.
Glycation, what's that doing?
It's where sugar molecules attach to collagen and elastin proteins, making them stiff and brittle.
Oh, wow. So the scaffolding of the skin is literally degrading under the surface, even while the surface still looks fine.
Yes, the habits are physically embedding themselves into your cellular makeup, and sometimes the body provides an incredibly loud early warning system that people completely misinterpret, which is hair.
Hair shedding. This is a huge one that causes so much silent panic.
It really does. It's a biological mechanism called telogen effluvium. When the body experiences a systemic shock from a severe nutritional deficiency, a massive spike in psychological stress, or those hormonal imbalances we discussed, it prematurely pushes hair follicles out of the growing phase and into the resting, shedding phase. Sudden hair thinning or excess shedding is rarely just a weird fluke. It is a brilliant, visible metric of internal systemic strain.
That makes so much sense. And there is a deeper, denser physical structure we absolutely have to talk about, one that is entirely invisible but arguably the most critical, which is the skeletal system.
Peak bone mass. This might be the single most unglamorous reality of your 20s, but it is deeply vital. The absolute strongest, most dense your skeleton will ever be is established in your third decade of life.
Wait, let's break down the mechanics of that. Our bones aren't just dead scaffolding, they're living tissue constantly being remodeled, right?
Exactly. You have osteoclasts, which break down old bone tissue, and osteoblasts, which build new bone.
Builders and breakers.
Right. Throughout childhood and your 20s, the builders outpace the breakers. You're actively laying down dense structural tissue. But right around age 30, that process shifts. The bank closes.
Seriously. So you are basically stuck with the bone density you managed to bank by the time you leave your 20s.
Pretty much. You can maintain what you have later in life through resistance training, but you cannot significantly build upon the peak.
That is terrifying.
It's sobering for sure. So when we talk about lifting weights, getting adequate protein, and optimizing vitamin D and calcium now, it's not just about aesthetics. It is literally fortifying the structural frame you will be trapped inside for the next 60 years. If you are sedentary now, you are practically volunteering for osteopenia in your 50s.
Okay, so we've mapped out the physical realities, the flatlining metabolism, the fragile hormones, the degrading collagen, the bone bank. But let's move up the nervous system to the ultimate command center. What is actually happening in the brain that is driving all of these chaotic, off-roading lifestyle choices in the first place? Why do we actively choose to ignore our biology?
This is where neuroscience meets behavior. Most people assume that when you turn 18 or 20, your brain is a finished, fully baked product. But structurally, it is still actively maturing.
Still developing.
Yes. Specifically, the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe area governing complex planning, prioritizing, long-term consequence evaluation, and impulse control, is undergoing a massive process called myelination.
Myelination is the insulation of neural pathways, right?
Yeah.
Like wrapping the wires in myelin so the signals travel faster and more efficiently.
Yes, you've got it. The brain is upgrading its communication network, turning dirt roads into superhighways. But that prefrontal superhighway isn't fully paved until you are about 25, sometimes later.
I have to play devil's advocate here, because the societal disconnect is wild. We look at a 21-year-old and say, okay, you are a fully equipped adult. We trust them to sign legally binding apartment leases, take out $50,000 in student loans, manage corporate budgets, and make lifelong career choices.
Yep.
But biologically, their hardware is still literally downloading the software required to fully grasp the long-term consequences.
It is a profound societal mismatch. You are legally an adult, you are highly intelligent, and you are capable of complex abstract thought. But the braking system, the neural hardware required to regulate impulses and maintain disciplined structure when nobody else is forcing you to, is still under construction.
Which perfectly explains the mental whiplash of being 24. You can have these moments of intense, profound self-awareness, mapping out your 5-year plan, and 6 hours later, you make an impulsive decision that completely sabotages your own goals. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's an inconsistent braking system.
Exactly. And modern environments actively exploit this vulnerable developmental window. Consider what a developing prefrontal cortex is up against today. Endless short-form video algorithms, hyper-palatable processed foods, notifications designed by behavioral psychologists.
It's a minefield.
It really is. These systems are explicitly engineered to flood the brain with dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation.
They train the brain to crave constant, rapid-fire novelty. It's literally a dopamine slot machine in your pocket.
And when your baseline dopamine expectation is hijacked by high stimulation novelty every 3 seconds, ordinary biologically essential tasks become agonizingly understimulating.
Like cooking a meal.
Yes, cooking a nutritious meal, doing 30 minutes of mobility work, or just lying in bed without a screen feels unbearably dull. The true threat to people in their 20s isn't a lack of ambition. The threat is a fundamentally fragmented attention span that prevents them from executing basic biological maintenance.
So if the brain is craving extreme novelty and struggling with impulse control, it makes perfect sense that 20-somethings naturally gravitate toward extremes. The braking system is offline, so it's all or nothing.
That is the defining behavioral mistake of the decade, treating the body in extreme pendulums. It manifests in fitness with extreme bulk and cut cycles, punishing the body with volume instead of progressive overload. In nutrition, it's aggressive caloric restriction followed by binging.
Or the modern intellectual extreme, which is toxic productivity. Working yourself to the absolute bone, fueled by caffeine and anxiety, followed by total burnout, where you can barely get off the couch for 3 days. We think we're being hardcore and driven, but mechanistically we're just violently swinging the physiological pendulum between crisis and recovery.
Right. And the body will survive those extreme swings in your 20s. It will fight to regain homeostasis, but surviving is not thriving. The ultimate biological antidote to this chaos, and I know it is a tough concept for a novelty-craving brain to accept, is what we can call boring consistency.
Boring consistency. My prefrontal cortex is protesting just hearing the phrase, but the biology makes sense. What does that actually look like when we strip away the extreme optimization culture?
It looks like adopting simple, non-obsessive, mechanistic habits that actually regulate your biology, rather than trying to perfectly hack your life. And it gets even more noticeable as you move into your 30s, which is something we can explore separately. But right now, it starts with defending your sleep architecture like it is your most valuable asset.
Because it is. We just established that testosterone production, insulin regulation, and prefrontal cortex function all hinge on deep sleep.
Exactly. And defending your sleep doesn't require a 3-hour aesthetic evening routine with cold plunges and perfectly calibrated lighting. It requires mechanical rhythm. Going to bed and waking up at relatively consistent times, anchoring your circadian rhythm. If you stop wildly shifting your sleep schedule every weekend, half of your mysterious fatigue issues will evaporate.
Okay, anchor the circadian rhythm. What is the next pillar of boring consistency?
Mechanical loading. Strength training and moving your body through a full range of motion at least twice a week. You do not need to be a powerlifter. You need to apply enough mechanical tension to muscle fibers to signal growth, keep the cardiovascular system adaptable, and physically deposit minerals into your bone bank before the window closes.
And regarding fuel, I imagine we need to apply the same anti-extreme logic to nutrition.
Stop treating food as random, chaotic events. You don't need to obsessively track every single macronutrient or restrict entire food groups. Just provide the engine with a reliable substrate. Prioritize adequate protein for muscle synthesis and neurotransmitter production. Eat enough dietary fiber to maintain the gut microbiome, which heavily influences your mood and immune system. Do not turn feeding yourself into a massive, stressful project that spikes your cortisol.
And dialing back the social off-roading, I assume?
Be highly aware of how alcohol and late nights compound. Most people in their 20s aren't failing because of one catastrophic health crisis. They're struggling because they have 5 or 6 small invisible habits, all quietly pushing their physiology in the wrong direction. Reducing alcohol intake improves sleep architecture, which stabilizes hormones, which fixes energy. It's cascade.
It all comes back to body literacy, actually paying attention to the telemetry of your body instead of waiting for a systemic breakdown to force your hand.
If you have chronic breakouts, if your hair is shedding, if your baseline energy is permanently low, do not dismiss it simply because society says you are too young to have a problem. Your biology is sending you data. Read it.
If we weave all of this together, the reality of metabolic stability, the fragility of hormones under stress, the window for bone density, and the ongoing myelination of the brain, it completely shifts the paradigm of what the 20s actually are. This decade shouldn't be viewed as a fleeting physical peak that you have to desperately exhaust before it disappears.
Not at all. The most scientifically accurate way to view your 20s is as a biological setup phase. It is the decade where you program your default settings. Do you have the neurological pathways built to wind down before a stressful week? Have you developed the metabolic flexibility to handle different foods without physiological panic? Are you depositing density into your bonds, or are you operating under the assumption that future you will somehow magically solve it?
You are taking the immense pressure off being perfect right now and shifting the focus to being structurally prepared for what comes next. The health of your 30s and 40s doesn't just spontaneously generate, it grows directly out of the cellular habits you quietly repeat today.
That is the core biological truth. What happens to your body at 25 isn't about aging. It is about physically experiencing the friction between your newfound environmental freedom and your physiological needs. You are incredibly capable at this age, but the deepest lesson your biology is trying to impart is simple. What you repeat, you become. Your cells are listening to your habits.
What you repeat, you become. That is a profoundly grounding thought. And frankly, it's a relief. You don't need to completely transform your entire life overnight or panic about the passage of time. You just need to respect the incredible compounding power of small, consistent, boring choices. A little more sleep rhythm, a little more structural awareness, a bit more attention to the hormonal signals your body is broadcasting.
Just letting the biology do its job.
Exactly. Those boring, consistent choices won't just make you feel sharper by Friday. They will physically construct the cellular foundation of the person you will be for decades to come. And there's one final, staggering thought to leave you with. Emerging research in epigenetics shows that your lifestyle choices, your stress, your sleep, your diet, they can actually attach chemical tags to your DNA, turning certain genes on or off. The habits you are building right now in your 20s aren't just shaping your own health, they are potentially altering the genetic baseline you will eventually pass down to your future children. You aren't just building your foundation, you might be building theirs. Something to chew on the next time you find yourself scrolling your timeline at 2 a.m.
That really puts it all into perspective.
Thanks for listening to TalkKast.